Donald Trump on fire in a New York courtroom. You'll see what he had to say. And is Matt Gaetz suddenly making a whole lot of sense? Well, you be the judge. Sage Steele has plenty to say about her interview with Joe Biden from several years ago, and it's not pretty for the president. And apparently it's against the law to call a fat lesbian. Coming up next. Now that Sage Steele has left the ESPN anchor desk, she's able to speak her mind, and she had something to say about Joe Biden.
And then I said, oh, so you were a receiver? And he started to explain it. And here's the saddest thing. His voice just trailed off. He said, I was good. And then he went silent and he goes, oh, never mind. No, you're laughing. I thought it was so sad because I realized that's why he was in his basement during the whole election cycle. Right. Because even then, he couldn't finish his sentences. He struggled. So forget about politics. I don't care. I didn't vote for him. However, that made me sad to realize.
So you didn't vote for Biden either?
No. Wow. No.
And that's okay.
Thank you.
Still love you.
Okay, thank you.
And also.
No, hell no, I didn't vote for Biden. And look what we have.
Even with the choice being Trump.
Yes.
But see, that's A, B, C, D, E. That's just the E. You got to accept the E. It's okay.
Yeah, it is sad. I mean, we're used to seeing this all the time now, sadly. Why have we gotten used to this? Why have we gotten used to seeing the President of the United States, the commander-in-chief, the man who actually has his finger on the nuclear button, not able to follow a simple train of thought?
I hope this experience for the Speaker has been one of a personal revelation. I'm not being facetious. Anyway.
Think about this for a minute. This is a conversation that he was having, talking about himself. It's not like he was talking about global economics or OPEC oil crisis or the nuances of national security policy. He was just reflecting on his life as a college football player, and he couldn't remember. His voice trailed off. He was lost. And there's something more important about this entire little anecdote that Sage Steele has shared with us, and that is, you see, she worked for ESPN, which is owned by Disney, ABC News, that whole conglomerate over there. She knew this was going on. She saw it happen before her very eyes back in 2021, and it took her 2 years to leave that company so that she could tell the truth about what she saw, right? She wasn't allowed to otherwise. And they edited that interview enough so that you didn't see these really sort of sad, scary moments, right? Yeah, here's part of the interview. This is what it looked like.
Mr. President, thank you for being here as we get set for a wonderful day in sports. Opening day for America's national pastime. So as thankful as we are to have baseball starting on time this year, we are obviously still in the rollout phase of the COVID-19 vaccine, and that affects teams and fans, everybody. So, Mr. President, how do you envision this season going with so much up in the air still?
Well, there's not so much up in the air if we listen. What I was able to do is get over 600 million doses.
Yeah, he was supposed to be talking about the vaccines and COVID and everyone going back to see baseball in 2021 because, thank God, Joe Biden's president. Now we can watch baseball again. That was the message they were sending. And behind the scenes, little did we know that he couldn't even put 3 or 4 sentences together. As Sage Steele said, it's sad, but it's more than that. It's infuriating. President Biden gives interviews all the time. He did it during the campaign, too. He's constantly talking to reporters. He's constantly sitting down for 60 Minutes or for George Stephanopoulos or Jake Tapper or whoever. And you know this goes on behind the scenes. You know this happens all the time. But those reporters, they're not saying anything, are they? They're just pretending like our president has his act together and can actually complete a couple of basic sentences. Another great thing that Sage Steele said in this interview with Bill Maher, and you should watch the whole thing, it's worth it. She reflected on the left's opinion of voter ID laws in this country, and specifically how it relates to the African-American community.
So stupid that for the people to say that it's racist to have people to show a freaking ID to vote. Because
I agree.
Because we're not as Black people, we're
I
not smart
agree.
enough to
It's
remember our driver's
It's so
license?
funny when the woke do these things that they think are so not racist that are then
It's
really,
actually
they're so-
racist.
Yeah, same thing with they constantly conflate like Black people committing violence with police being bad to Black people. Like let's pull the police out. Well, that hurts the people. You know
The people who need help the most.
Former President Donald Trump was in court yesterday, again in New York. And no, this wasn't one of the multiple criminal trials that he's facing down the road. This was a civil trial brought by the state of New York. And when he emerged from the courtroom, he was having none of it.
I borrowed the money, I paid back the money in full, 100%. There were no defaults, there were no letters of reprimand, the banks were extremely happy, and in many cases I paid the money back early. And then I got sued years later by this horrible attorney general, this woman that ran for governor and failed. You know, she did this because she was running for governor. And then she ran and she failed. She had no polls and they forced her out. And she came back and she became attorney general again. And we got stuck with it. So she brought the case under the statute that had never been used for a thing like this before, ever, where I'm not entitled to a jury. Because if I had a jury, even though it's in New York, and I think I'd be fine with New York, but if I had a jury, we'd win this case very easily. But I don't have a jury. And you see what's happening. This is a railroading. And it's the beginning of communism in our country. This is the beginning of communism. So we're going back in, playing the game, we're doing everything right. But just so you remember, I borrow money, the statements were perfect. Not only perfect, the statements are much more conservative than my real net worth. My real net worth is much higher, not lower, much higher than the statements. So I put the statements in. They don't use the statements because it has a disclaimer clause. They do their own work. The clause tells them, do your own due diligence, do your own work. And that's where we are. And I got sued. And I hear I may be guilty of a lot for no reason. They may give a lot of money for something where there was nothing wrong. This is a witch hunt. This is just a continuation of the witch hunt that started the day I came down the escalator in Trump Tower. And it's a shame for our country. You borrow money, you pay it back, the bank loves us. They said, what did he do wrong? He didn't do anything wrong. We loaned him money, a big bank. These are big banks, by the way, represented by the biggest law firms, the most prestigious, the best law firms in the country. You borrow money, you pay it back, and you get sued by a political animal. And that's where we are. And that's the way it goes. And that's why New York State is failing, and that's why companies are leaving by the thousands.
Yeah, communist is right. This is a Stalinist tactic. This is something that Mao would do. We've never done this in this country before. The kind of legal barrage that Donald Trump is facing right now, really just because people don't like his politics. In fact, he talked about the very attorney general in New York who's targeting him with this latest round of charges. Take a listen to this.
This witch hunt that's going on using statute 6312, which is a consumer fraud statute, which may be unconstitutional, doesn't allow me a jury, doesn't allow me anything. We have a prosecutor, Letitia James, who's incompetent, and what she's doing to our state, forcing companies out by the thousands, forcing people out, forcing companies out by the thousands, while crime and violent crime in particular runs rampant. So this witch hunt does not allow me a jury. A lot of people say, oh, that can't be possible, somebody didn't check a box. It has nothing to do with it. Under 6312, you are not entitled to a jury. It's the first time it's ever been used for a purpose like this. Never been used. They used it on me, the former president, the leading candidate. I'm leading Joe Biden by a lot, which is probably why this is all happening. Not probably, why, it's definitely. They're coordinating with Washington, 100%. But without that, none of these cases would be going on. They've weaponized justice in our country.
And make no mistake, Attorney General Letitia James, who President Trump just mentioned, she ran for office in New York based on one campaign theme: I'm going to get Trump. Literally, that was it. You make me Attorney General, and I'm going to use the power of my office to get Donald Trump. Now, after President Trump's remarks that you just saw, Attorney General James, who was in the courtroom, I guess she really wants to focus on this case for some reason. I'm sure it's not politics. She stepped in front of the cameras and said this.
Trump's comments were offensive. They were baseless. They were void of any facts and or any evidence. What they were comments that unfortunately fomented violence, and comments that I would describe as race baiting, and comments, unfortunately, that appeals to the bottom of our humanity. This case was brought simply because it was a case where individuals have engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud. And I will not sit idly by and allow anyone to subvert the law. And lastly, I will not be bullied. And so Mr. Trump is no longer here. The Donald Trump show is over. This was nothing more than a political stunt.
The Trump show is over? You asked for the Trump show. You created the Trump show. You're the producer of this Trump show. And I promise you, it's only just begun. It's chaos in the House of Representatives. Speaker is vacated and we have nothing but Republican chaos. The entire country is melting down. This is awful. Or is it? Vivek, what do you think?
This is going to be controversial, but let's go. Here's what I think everybody should agree on. The point of removing the House Speaker was to sow chaos. That's what the critics of Matt Gaetz and everybody else is saying. And my advice to the people who voted to remove him is own it. Admit it. There was no better plan of action of who's going to fill that speaker role. So was the point to sow chaos? Yes, it was. But the real question to ask, let's get to the bottom of it, is whether chaos is really such a bad thing in times such as these. When we live in a moment where we have a border crisis at our southern border, where there are tens of thousands of illegal migrants crossing per week, driving an epidemic of lawlessness across this country, are we sure that that status quo is what we want? Or is a little chaos really such a bad thing? When we have a national debt of $33 trillion and growing under the watch of Republicans and Democrats alike in power, are we sure the status quo is what we want? Or is a little chaos really such a bad thing? When we have a climate cult that shackles the United States and shackles our economy while letting our enemy China roam free, are we really sure that the status quo is what we want? Or is a little chaos such a bad thing? If we're dependent on our enemy for our modern way of life, and we have people who are bought and paid for in Washington, D.C. by special interests and a class of lobbyists and a class of super PAC puppet masters, and we keep marching to our same fate, are we really sure that chaos is such a bad thing? That's the real question. I would rather just everybody smoke that out and debate it in the open. Because do we have a plan to replace the House Speaker? No. But is that the most important question? No, it's not. We don't have a House Speaker. What's the plan to replace the Speaker? Everybody asks. Here's what I say. Who cares until we actually have a plan for how to address the deficit in our budget, how to address the $33 trillion in our national debt, how to actually seal our own southern border in this country, how to deal with an epidemic of crime across the United States of America, how to reduce our dependence on an enemy for our modern way of life. That's what I want to plan for. And then we're going to ask the question of who's going to be the best babysitter to shepherd a bunch of people in Congress and in a Republican Party to actually get us there. That's the order we need to go in. And so for everybody out there who's asking the question of what's the plan to get a new speaker, you're asking the wrong question. What's the plan to actually revive this country? What's the plan to shut down the unconstitutional administrative state? What's the plan to grow this economy? What's the plan to avoid World War III by funding wars we shouldn't be funding? What's the plan to declare independence from China? What's the plan to revive national pride in this country and our missing national identity, and to seal our border, and to revive meritocracy, and to actually pursue excellence in this country again? Yeah, that's the plan I want to hear about. And then we can talk about who's going to be the shepherd of actually being the assembly line mover in the House of Representatives to get that moving forward. So I guess you might have guessed my view by now. You know what? Once in a while, a little chaos isn't such a bad thing. Just ask our founding fathers. That's what this country's founded on, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
Well, I'm sure if Vivek had a mic, he'd drop it right there. I mean, it is an important point, and it actually, well, it appeals to a lot of people in this country. The whole idea of chaos right now maybe is exactly what we need, considering business as usual has gotten to us exactly to the place we are. Chaos? All right, a little bit of chaos would be nice. Seems like a whole lot of people in Washington, D.C. are pissed off at Matt Gaetz. He's the congressman who basically removed the gavel from Speaker Kevin McCarthy's hands. And now we've got chaos, as I'm sure you've heard. So why are they so mad at Matt Gaetz, though? I mean, when he explains why he did what he did, kind of makes sense. Take a watch.
If you were to move forward, if there were to be any kind of agreement, what would that look like, and what would you need to see from the Speaker at this moment?
Well, I think the die is cast based on the motion I just filed. I think the time for that discussion would have been over the last several weeks, but instead we saw the Speaker continuing to, the Speaker did not just fail to remediate the breach of the agreement he made with us in January, he accelerated the instances of breach. Like, after I laid out the breach, he went and violated the 72-hour rule. After I laid out the breach, he violated the $100 million no amendment suspension rule. So he seems to be reverting to the very unfortunate muscle memory of Washington, D.C. that has put our nation atop a $33 trillion debt, that has led to $2 trillion annual deficits in our near future, and the rapid global de-dollarization of the economy. When you look at the BRICS system, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they're moving away from the dollar. And just in August, they added 6 new countries, including G20 economies in the Western Hemisphere and Gulf monarchies. Moreover, you saw U.S. News say that the number one economic trend of 2023 is de-dollarization globally. This worries me. You all get all worked up that there's going to be some uncomfortable, chaotic moment, that I'll feel pressure from conservatives or Democrats or whomever. I feel the judgment of history. I feel the weight of that. I worry that when the history books are written about this country going down, that my name is going to be on the board of directors here. And if this country's going down, and if we're losing the dollar, I am going down fighting. And I don't care if that means fighting Republicans, Democrats, the Uniparty, the leadership, the PACs, the lobbyists. I've had it. I've been here 7 years. We don't have a budget. We haven't had one since the mid-90s. I am through with it. I apologize for using that word, but the only path forward here is to have single subject spending bills that can be reviewed, amended, considered, and I think that is the responsible way that our legislatures all over this country operate for good reason.
Mr. What Republicans do you have with you in the House?
How do you respond to Kevin McCarthy's claim that this is payback for an ethics investigation?
I am the most investigated man in the United States Congress. I have been cleared by the FBI, the DOJ, the Federal Elections Commission by a 5-0 vote. It seems that the Ethics Committee's interest in me waxes and wanes based on my relationship with the Speaker. I believe that Speaker McCarthy is trying to signal to the Ethics Committee to pursue me. When I gave my Sunday interviews yesterday, indicating that I intended to file this motion to vacate Speaker McCarthy, hours did not pass before Republicans and members of the Ethics Committee were backgrounding reporters that they wanted to expel me from the United States Congress for bringing a motion to vacate under the rules that we negotiated in January after Kevin McCarthy broke his word. They want to expel me for Congress from that. So, you know what? I'm built for the battle. I face down tougher than these folks, and I'll do it again.
See, setting aside the disruption that he caused in the House of Representatives and how right now we've got a vacant speaker seat, when you actually hear what he has to say, it's hard to argue with him, right? I mean, even the New York Times published an op-ed that said, what if Matt Gaetz is right? Take a look. Wait a minute. Who's that handsome, young, strapping broadcaster standing next to the congressman from Florida? He looks familiar. Listen, I know Matt Gaetz is raising money off of this thing, and I know that Matt Gaetz probably has higher ambitions beyond his House seat, and I know that he rubs people the wrong way, but color me shocked that somebody in Washington, D.C. has political ambition. Isn't that sort of the standard thing in this town? Fact of the matter is, regardless of his tactics, regardless of his personality, regardless of his hairstyle, if he's right about the issues, then he's right about the issues. What do you think? Candace Owens gave a beautiful verbal smackdown to a trans activist on a college campus the other night, and you've got to see it right now.
What do you have to say to the trans students on this campus who actively feel victimized by your presence here today? Additionally, you just pointed out that this man detransitioned, but earlier in your speech...
Guys, I want to hear her. Go ahead. What do I have to say? Just the question, please. No speech. What is the question?
What do you have to say to the trans students on this campus who feel actively victimized by your presence here?
Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this. Next question. My goodness. Seriously, somebody just give out free hugs or something somebody give out free hugs. I can't be your mommy, okay? I'm too pregnant. I can't be your mommy.
This is fantastic on multiple levels. The whole idea that people's words cause actual harm and victimize individuals is, well, it's bull. Whatever happened to sticks and stones may break your bones, right? I mean, we've actually raised a whole generation now who think that words are literal violence. But just the other day, over in Sweden, a journalist was jailed for 60 days because he called another journalist, a woman, a gay woman of a certain size. He called her a fat lesbian, which is probably rude and offensive, and it probably hurt her feelings. And he's going to jail. Like thrown in prison for calling a fat lesbian a fat lesbian. What's going on here? And of course, let's remember the political left, they revere Scandinavia. They want our country to be just like Sweden. I mean, except for their immigration policies, but that's a whole other story. Let's get back to Candace Owens with this trans activist. The only way to respond to somebody who says that they're being victimized by your words is exactly the way Candace Owens just responded. Really? You're hurt by my words? Really? Okay, so buy yourself a helmet and get out of my face. I have no time for you. Words don't actually hurt. And if anyone was hurt by what I just had to say, well, rewind the video and hear what Candace has to say. Oh, and one more thing. The fact that Candace Owens is great with child, she even referred to the fact that she's just too pregnant to deal with this crap, it actually brings home the point that sometimes when a person acts like a spoiled brat, they need a mother to step in and treat them like the spoiled brat that they are. And maybe the real problem here is that this woman of college age who was so worked up about this issue, she didn't have a parent in her life to actually tell her when she was acting like a spoiled brat crybaby. That's it for Larry. I'm Larry O'Connor. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow, share, all those things you're supposed to do, and we'll be back next time.